Yes, I'm here again. You know, in my last series, I told you about the similarities with Rastafarians and Christians and the background of Rastafarian development and the, the original concept of Rastafarianism. As you know, in the book of First and Second Samuel, you got Samson, who was a Nazarite, and he didn't eat no meat or he didn't drink alcohol and he didn't cut his hair and all that sort of thing. And then with King Solomon, who was King David's son, he basically observed all those laws that you call it the Nazarite law. Well, today I'm going to go a step further and sort of look at the contemporary version of this organization and how it came into being. Now, basically, in Christianity, we've got prophecies that have been fulfilled. In the Bible, it tells you in Micah 5, verse 1 and 2, where Jesus would be born, that he would be born in Bethlehem of Judah. Now, that prophecy was fulfilled. Now, strangely enough, the Rastafarian concept of their faith, they're basically saying that because of what Marcus Garvey said many years ago, that a king would emerge from Ethiopia, a black king, and because that actually happened, because Haile Selassie did actually crown king in the 1930s, and he came to Jamaica. Well, he went to Jamaica, and his coronation was attended by over 50 world leaders, and in the Rastafarian community, they were led to believe that the Black Messiah had returned to earth. Now that's their concept. Anyway, since the early 16th century, the history of Jamaica has been associated with slavery, as you know, Christian evangelization, colonization, which gave rise to numerous revolutions. Now, most Jamaicans have always lived in a constant state of resistance. In other words, they're stubborn and they don't want to comply with the social order. Now, this sort of mentality gave rise to the Rastafarian movement. This is what historians believe. Now, today I'm going to more or less examine Rastafarianism as a Pan-African version of Christianity, because the two they don't really intertwine because they believe different things. But the fact, I'm going to dig a bit deeper into the roots of Rastafarianism. Now, Rastafarianism takes its origin from Ethiopia, that's in Africa. This is consisted of the period of Christian evangelization. Strangely enough, the first Rastaman came from an Anglican family, and I'll tell you more about him today. His name was, because he's dead, obviously. I think his name was Leonard Percival Owell. Yeah, but I'll tell you more about that later on. Now, drawing from the Ethiopian references in the Bible, because there's about 45 references in the Bible about Ethiopia, and basically in the Old Testament, in Psalm 68 verse 31, it tells us that princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall soon be stretched out her hands unto God. Now, the first Rastaman, apparently, and Marcus Garvey, obviously, he was, they saw him as a prophet because the fact that he said that a black king would come out of Egypt, but really, when you look at it, it's the Bible that said it first. Because if you look in Psalm 68 verse 31, it tells you that princes shall come out of Egypt. And anyway, it was a king who came out of Ethiopia, so it's sort of, the Bible interprets itself. However, the theological roots of Rasta can be traced to independent preachers, like I said, Leonard Percival Owell and many others who were the first to establish the claim that Rastafari Makonnen was God. Now, that was his name. They preach about his divinity, and they often spoke about black pride and return of the black diaspora to Africa, because they think that places like England and Jamaica are Babylonian systems and that Ethiopia is their promised land. Yes, that's what they believe. Now, Rastafari Makonnen was his original name before he was crowned King of Ethiopia, and they changed his name to Haile Selassie the First. Yes, that was that. And let me rest that right there. Now, like I said, I'm going to tell you about the first Rastaman, so I'll just focus now on this particular gentleman who started the Rastafarian faith. Now, his name was Leonard Percival Howell, and he was born in June 1898. Yes. He died, I think he died in 1975, but I'll confirm that later on. Now, Leonard Howell was the first of 11 children born to his parents in Clarendon, Jamaica. Now, at that time, Jamaica was under the colonial rule of Britain. And the descendants of slaves, they were slave, they originated from the slave master. So these children were born and they went through turbulent times. Now, this was after the Morant Bay Rebellion of 1865, where the government were oppressing people like Sam Sharp, who was hanged. Yeah, they hang him in Montego Bay Square, and if you go visit Jamaica, you'll see the statue of Sam Sharp. He was hanged because of his beliefs, and he just wanted to break away from the social order, and they just wanted to live normal lives, But the government used to build prisons and asylums to lock away them, calling them deviants, and anybody who lashed out basically against the unbalanced social order would face prosecution. Now, they saw them as marginalized and illiterate set of people, and they were really being oppressed. And as I go along, you'll see how badly they were oppressed. Now, Leonard Percival Howell, he was a Jamaican who would resolutely fight to embrace his culture, because most of his younger years his teenage years were spent in New York, in Harlem, where he joined Marcus Garvey, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and basically wanted to uplift the minds of black people who had been suppressed by centuries of oppression. Now, he more or less came face to face with his blackness while he was in Harlem, New York, and teamed up with Marcus Garvey. Now, at age 13, Howell witnessed the murder of a woman by her boyfriend. In other words, this lady was murdered by her boyfriend, and this young little teenage boy witnessed it. And because he refused to testify against the accused man, they made his life a virtual hell. Now, they were not very happy about the boy's refusal to testify about what he saw. But then his dad, who was a Jamaica banana export industry owner, he smuggled his son on a banana boat in the year 1912 to America, just to avoid persecution and avoid all the hullabaloo and all that, which maybe I would do the same for my son. Who knows? Parents will do whatever is necessary to protect their children. Now, after spending about 20 years traveling around the world, they caught up with him and he was sent to prison and deported to Jamaica after 2 years. So at that point in time, he renewed ties with Marcus Garvey and started his own sect, his organization. After a few years, embarked on a campaign to sort of enlighten different disenfranchised blacks whom he believed should stop paying homage to a white God, because the rest of man believed that God is not white, he's black. Which in our Christian culture, it tells you that God is a spirit, and they who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And he wasn't happy that they were paying taxes to this oppressive colonial government, so he began preaching that Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia was the black messiah, and urged black people to worship him as their God and king. Yes. So the coronation of Haile Selassie in 1930, so many world leaders, as I was saying, attend the ceremony. But guess what happened at that ceremony? King George V was the king of England at the time, and his son visited at the time when Haile Selassie was being crowned king of Ethiopia, and bowed down before Haile Selassie. And because of that now, Owell got the ammunition that he needed, because he was rebelling against the social order. And he apparently said, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has broken the chain, and we, the black race, are finally free. So King George V is no longer king, because him sent his son to bow down to the new King of King and Lord of Lord, Rastafari. Hey. This resulted in Owell being charged with sedition. Yes, and he went on trial in 1934 and was prosecuted by the same prosecutor. So them say long run short catch. The same prosecutor, Mr. H.M. Radcliffe, who wanted him to testify about the murder. I was telling you about the man who murdered his woman. So he was happy that he caught up with him. Yes. And as maybe at that time, 2 years was a long time in prison, and that was what happened. But because of the great public interest in the trial, Owell became a cult hero. Yes, everybody was interested and wanted to find out what was happening. That's how it is, when you're on trial and people have a lot of interest in it. It really go in your favor. Yes. Now, after this man's release from prison, he left Trinityville in St. Thomas, where he used to reside, and he purchased a property at East Queen Street in Kingston before relocating to approximately 500 acres of property he bought in Sligoville near St. Catherine, and he called it Pinnacle. Listen. Now, this man was regarded as the founding father of the Rastafarian faith, and his following grew rapidly. Yes, people from all walks of life was attracted to the movement. Skilled craftsmen and women, nurses, and other professionals took up residence at Pinnacle, which is the first self-sustaining community in Jamaica. Now, these residents, they planted a variety of ground provisions, including marijuana, which they call ganja. They invested in livestock, and they built a school, bakery, library. It was their sort of home that they didn't have to rely on the government or any outside sources. Now, there were surplus crops, and these would be sold to people on the outside. So many of the residents were able to take care of their needs. They didn't need any government assistance or anything. But Mr. Leonard Owell and his followers were made to live a life of hell, because according to the government, they were daring to resist the social order. And government don't like that sort of thing. Now, I was gonna say this poor man, but this man, well, poor man, yeah, was targeted by government officials, and he was eventually sent to prison and then a madhouse, which they call asylum. Yes, more times than his son dared to remember, as his son recalled. They even branded him a madman, and he decided to stray from the colonial order, like Marcus Garvey, who rebelled against the social order. And during that period, they were killing lots of Rastas, but that's another episode that I need to tell you about, because what happened was there was an uproar and rumored that Rastaman had issues with somebody at a petrol station, and the government sent out a decree that anywhere they see the Rasta men, they should trim them. Sometimes they trim them with broken bottles. They treat them bad. The Rasta went through a bad patch. But you will know more about that as I go along. Now, there were various preachers, but I'm focusing on Mr. Owell, because he was the one who constructed a pinnacle and had over 3,000 people, I think, living there with him at the time. And oh, this is sliding down. Yes, you stay put, don't you slide down, because this is important that I'm coming up with now. Yeah, so basically, between the years 1941 and 1954, the police raided Pinnacle as a matter of course. Each time they raided, they seized thousands of pounds, claiming it was the proceeds of the sale of ganja. Yeah, so you imagine it was, the Rastas was trying to live a peaceful existence, and police always come early morning, raid, take away their money, beat them up and all that sort of things. So Owell said this was the persecution of the herbs. Now the police were determined to get rid of the people of the land. They wanted the land. So they raided and destroyed their personal documents, including proof of the ownership of the land. So once the document that you own the land is gone, it's no longer your land. They even accused Mr. Owell of murdering his wife, and to be quite frank, according to this, it was impossible to specify the cause of his wife's death at the time. And this man was terribly oppressed, even as a teenager. He and about 60 other children were arrested on trump-up charges because their dad gave them wrist watches and all that sort of thing, and they claimed that they needed receipts, and they made their life hell, basically. Now, in order to escape from this situation, Owell received a statement from the Governor General at the time that he would go around the streets of St. Catherine and other corporate areas giving money to the poor. This was what his main duty were. But the police arrested him, beat him terribly, and imprisoned him more than 50 times. And he always returned to live in Pinnacle upon his release from prison. Now, the similarity with Mr. Owell and with our Lord Jesus Christ is that Jesus was seen as resisting the social order of his day, and the leaders at the time, Herod and all that sort of, they felt threatened by him, and they conspired to have him arrested, and one of his disciples, Judas, sold him out, and they grabbed him. Judas said the one that I kiss is the one, and they caught him, beat him, and he went through all this. So when I read that Mr. Owell was beaten, imprisoned, Jesus was sent to prison too, locked down in a dungeon and left for dead. So there's a lot of similarities with the two. But there's no comparison, because obviously Jesus is the real Messiah, not like they're saying Haile Selassie is the Messiah because of he's the 225th descendant from King Solomon. So that's basically why they're saying he's a descendant. Yeah, he's a descendant, but obviously he wasn't God. Now in 1954, the state launched even a more bigger major offensive against the Pinnacle community, and this resulted in many of Orwell's followers being sent to prison, while others were left homeless. Early morning raids, loud banging, gathered up the people, put them on the street with only a few personal belongings, and the police reportedly burned down hundreds of houses. What a wicked thing to do. And even burned down Orwell's home. Now this was bad. And sent the people to prison on trumped up ganja charges. Now, most of the followers escaped to various parts of Jamaica, including St. Thomas, Clarendon, and West Kingston, in an area known as Jungle or Bacawall, which after they were there for a while, they traced them away and they made a development, and now it's called Tivoli Gardens. Now, his son, when he became an adult, he was persecuted for his own Rastafarian lifestyle. And Orwell continued to live at Pinnacle until the year 1956. And when he was tired of the persecution, he relocated near Tredegar Park. And the poor man was attacked by those who disagreed with his Afrocentric views. And in the year 1980, he was about 81 years old, and he was attacked by an angry mob at his home in Tredegar Park. Poor man. The mob wanted to cut out his tongue, and they beat him and slashed him mercilessly as he fought for his life. And he was, some people who were passing by, the Good Samaritans, they heard his shout and his cry, and they sort of subdued his attacker, and that's how they saved him. But all the beating that he got, he didn't recover from it, because he left Tredegar Park and he spent a couple of months at the Sheraton Hotel in Kingston, and then after another year or so, he died. He did not recover from his injuries. So it's really sad. It's really sad to know that Rastafarians, the early inception of Rastafarians, begin in such a brutal and terrible way. It's very, very bad. So now that you've known more about the person who started the Rastafarian movement in the 1930s, I'm gonna move on to how Rastafarianism developed over the centuries, because Rasta back then was the most persecuted individuals. Yes, some people used to call them black heart men, and they didn't hold them in any high regard at all. But I just wanted to give you the background. So keep watching, keep subscribing. I'm gonna tell you more about the Rastafarian and why they perceive Haile Selassie as their God. Alright? So thanks a lot for your time. Keep watching, keep subscribing, because knowledge is power. Tell a friend about this channel. Very informative and very useful for today's contemporary society. So thanks for your time. Thanks a lot. Keep watching. Bye-bye.